Hello YouTube. Today's video is about securing OpenShift with F5 BIG-IP Advanced WAF. And this demo is specifically recorded for the RSA Conference in 2023. So I'm going to keep this demo to hopefully under 3 minutes because that's really how much time people have when they come to a booth, or if they want to know what F5 is doing to secure a container platform or applications that are running in a container environment like OpenShift. And so BigIP here is really the gateway. BigIP is steering traffic into the cluster. And as a gateway, there's nothing better potentially than to permit legitimate traffic and block mysterious traffic. And that's really what this demo is for. Now, what's really interesting here is that the WAF and the WAF enforcement, the WAF policies, are created by, if you want to call it, the security administrator for BigIP. But that policy is actually invoked within the OpenShift or Kubernetes platform itself. And so what that means is that the logic of routing traffic within the container environment is somewhat decoupled from the securing OpenShift by the SecOps or the security administration. And that's really important. So the user can actually create, the OpenShift user can actually create his or her routes. So if we look at, for example, a OpenShift route, that is basically exposing a service or a, if you want to call it a pod, an application within OpenShift to ingress traffic from BigIP into the OpenShift cluster. And so the route is what defines the, if you want to call it the public IP that goes on BigIP, the health monitoring. The route defines kind of how the connection or traffic is handled. But the route doesn't necessarily need to define the security enforcement, because the security enforcement can be applied through a global policy. And that's really what this demo shows. So if you look at this route here, and if I actually expose the YAML, you can actually see here, it's a very simple route. We're doing TLS, if you want to call that decryption, so that we can look at the URI, we can look at cookies, etc. We're looking for the host, and we're sending you to this path called coffee, right? Or we're sending to this application called coffee, and the target port is port 8080. If you want to re-encrypt the backend, that's perfectly fine. You can do that. But that's a very, very, very simple definition of this route. And that's really what's happening here. And if you actually go ahead and actually click on this route, you can actually see there's the redirect, and actually there is the actual connection to this backend server, which we connected to 129.2. And if you go into BigIP, you can see here's the actual WAF policy itself that's in blocking state for all of my virtuals. And so quickly on this BigIP right here, I went to the coffee pod, and if I look at the members, 129.2. I think that's the one right there, 166. That is correct. That is the pod that I connected to running in OpenShift. So I connected to that coffee pod. If you actually see the workload, go down to the pod. It was one of these. I could figure out which one it is. One of these coffee ones in here that's running. There's actually 5 of them. I could figure out by the IP address, or look at the deployment. You can actually see here's the deployment right here, and there's actually 5. So what that means is that now you can actually communicate with the back end. But what happens if I had to go and actually use some or create some traffic that is somewhat not legitimate? So I created a legit traffic and it was fine, but let's go ahead and generate some mischievous traffic, like in this case, cross-site scripting. So as you can see right here, I'm going to generate some type of cross-site scripting attack where there's an alert, and it's an example attack. And let's go see what happens here. You can see automatically that this attack is rejected. So what happened right there is BigIP Advanced WAF rejected that mysterious traffic and logged it into the security logs. If you go to the error logs, you can see in the error logs the reporting right here. You can actually see that that was failed based on the request, and of course there was no response, but you can see the application security policy illegal method. You can see here that there was an illegal method that was deleted, and the protocol was enforced there. And so you can actually see that's what it was. That's what it was from. The first one was okay because that's just /coffee, but then you can see this mysterious traffic being blocked right here. So that is basically what Advanced WAF is doing, and Advanced WAF is configured through the OpenShift automation with the BigIP OpenShift automation tool, which is this CIS instance that's running in OpenShift that has a policy configured for the WAF policy itself. And you can actually see this in OpenShift. If you actually go to config maps, there's actually a global policy that's actually applied here. You can see here's a global policy. And within this global policy, what's happening is that there's a policy CRD. And the policy CRD dictates a overall, if you want to call it, corporate governance policy or application standards or patterns. And within this policy is all of the what I call security enforcement policies. So, for example, advanced WAF, denial of service, bot detection, any type of other types of TCP or networking mitigations. You can also use firewalls as well. And so that's what BigIP is doing here as a gateway for steering traffic. It's removing anything that that is affected by these policies. And these policies are actually applied through a CRD, which you can actually see if I actually go up to the actual repo itself and actually go look at the actual physical CRD. You can actually see the actual full repo is actually here. So if we go look at the CRD quickly, just to kind of show you that policy. So if we go to OpenShift routes, Cafe 1, I want to show you the CRD. And so the policy CRD is actually invoked. So this is what's being applied. This policy CRD you can see here is the WAF policy. This is the same WAF policy that we're using here. So there's the WAF policy right there. And so you can configure anything in this WAF policy that you want, or just use a default policy. And so that policy is associated to, think of it as the global policy, which is a gateway policy. So if you're familiar with that whole concept of gateway API, that's a gateway configuration. That gateway configuration dictates all of the configuration for all of the routes. So your web developers can go ahead and create all of their routes and not necessarily have to worry about having to provide the security, because the security is done at the gateway level to mitigate legitimate and not legitimate traffic from coming into the cluster. Then you can always apply other types of security methods once you're in the cluster. But what BigIP Advanced WAF will do is remove anything from getting into the cluster that shouldn't be getting into the cluster. So it's really your gateway, your front door, your security to the cluster. And then once you're in the cluster, you can do all sorts of other pod security, OpenShift security. There are other things that you can do. I'm not going to get into them in that video or in this video. So that is it for this video. I wanted to keep it short. And that describes how to secure OpenShift with F5 BIG-IP Advanced WAF for the RSA Conference 2023. If you're at the conference, stop by the F5 booth. If you are not subscribed, please subscribe. It really helps with the algorithms, and like this video. Thank you very much.